have Chad Drummond. He's the Edmonton Oilers strength coach, and he's been there since 2011 or 2012. Started off a couple years as the assistant sports and conditioning coach, and since 2000, well, let's do the math, whatever it is, he's been the head strength and conditioning coach. But we're going to be talking about fitness, sports and conditioning. We're going to be talking about some stuff in the pro level, and we have a few questions that we're going to start off with, and then we're going to be sprinkling in the questions from our live audience. So Chad, welcome to our live webinar. And I would just like to start off with, tell us how you got into sports and conditioning and your kind of your journey. Can you explain how this came about over the years and what got you interested in the whole bit?
Yeah, I'll give you the quick version so you can get to the good stuff. But yeah, so I grew up, I played high level sports. Hockey actually wasn't ever my primary sport. I played hockey, but more soccer, track and field, volleyball for me. From there, I developed an interest in it. I had a few injuries when I was young, so that kind of got me interested more on the return to play side, so more on the rehab, more on the strength and conditioning. And then from there, I went to university. I got a job with a guy named Simon Bennett in town. He had kind of two small training facilities here in town, and when I say small, they were about 10,000 square foot, so they were fairly big footprints, but he was kind of the name in hockey training. Any pro guy that was in town all went to Simon. So I got a job with him. I started helping him out with his group, started taking more and more responsibility there. Simon got hired with the Oilers in 2007. So in 2007, I started running his private business. And then in 2010, I started coming in with the Oilers to help him on an assistant basis. And then I took over in 2012, 2013 was my inaugural season. So actually the lockout year was my first year. And I've been here ever since. And kind of what you were saying, the position and the job has evolved over the years from, not just a strength coach, but, somebody that manages the psychology for the team, somebody that manages the nutrition for the team, somebody that manages all the sports science. That's probably been the biggest change since, from when I first came in, is the sports science side of things. I came in more of a coach, and, now I'm in more of a director position. So it's really evolved over the years, and, we're involved with some pretty cool, some progressive things. So, yeah, that's the quick version.
So no, that is a quick version, but it says it all. And it actually is going to lead me to a couple questions. So when you say the sports science, what type of sports science are you talking about? That's really evolved.
Yeah, so we collect quite a few metrics, whether it's in the gym or on the ice. So when guys are in the gym, like we do force plate testing, we're always looking at velocity, whatever exercise they do, whether it's a power strength exercise, we're always collecting numbers. We're always comparing those numbers out. We're looking for anything that can help us around, how do we properly train the guys, or where is their fatigue level today? How do we adjust the program to match how that player is feeling? We do stuff like HRV, we do basic stuff like daily weigh-ins. On ice, there's blood testing that's mixed in there too that we do periodically. On ice, we use Catapult as our tracking system. So we're looking at metrics. We're looking around force, velocity, where it has a gyroscope built in there, so we can look at mechanics. We could look at growing load. We have heart rate monitors that we have on the guys. So we look at internal, external load. We can look at comparisons there. So my department, we kind of manage and organize all that information, and then we distribute out to coaches, management, therapists, all that kind of good stuff.
Wow. So can you, just based on that science, like Zach and Dalton Prout were telling me a lot of the stuff that's coming out, that they're able to put chips in the jerseys and stuff like that. But based on some of the feedback you get back, is there a way that, or can you tell if someone's lacking sleep or if their nutrition's off, of too many carbs, anything like that through the science?
Yeah, so that's another layer to it. So we use a system. I'll start with the nutrition side. So we use a system called Fit3D, and it basically takes a scan of their body, and we'll do that throughout the season. So that gives us body composition, and then how that composition is distributed. So I can see like the left quad versus the right quad, so we can see if, you know, maybe they're losing size, maybe there was an injury that's impacting, you know, the girth of the quad that we didn't even know about, or maybe it was a little injury and then he's been compensating as the weeks go. So we use that to basically monitor their body composition. And then from that, if it's veering from what normal is, then we start having some conversations and then potentially get a nutritionist involved if we have to. So that's kind of how we monitor that. And then what was the second part of your question? The nutrition and what else?
And sleep. Can you tell if someone's lacking sleep?
Yeah, so we do sleep monitoring. We have in the past blanketed on everybody. We found that it's challenging and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So we don't have it on all our players, but we have it on players that need it. So we do daily questionnaires. So if we start picking up on a sleep issue or a player is, you know, honestly telling us that they're struggling with their sleep, then we'll throw a monitor on and take a little bit of a deeper dive. Yeah. So there's just multi layers to it.
No, it's incredible. Like, you know, my son, it's funny, every webinar I do, I always talk about my son, and I don't do it to talk about my son. I talk about him because he's the closest thing to me, and we have conversations every day. But it was amazing because I'm a guy that, you know, I try to take care of my body and my life. So I've always, you know, I work out early in the morning and I get to bed, unless I have to work. I'm usually in bed by 9:30, quarter to 10, where I do a little reading and crash. He hears me talk about you need to get to bed. You need to eat this, not to be crazy with him, but to get him to understand the principles of sleep, get him to understand the principles of what you're putting in your body, because it actually matters. So the more and more time he spends with, you know, Zach, Dalton, Aaron, Ekblad, whatever, all the guys, he hears the same words over and over and over again, you know, because Zach literally goes to bed 9:30, so does Dalton. And he goes, okay, so my dad's not crazy. So for the younger guys or kids going into the pro levels, can you just touch on that? Like how important, because it just seems like, yeah, I go to sleep. What's the big deal? Because I used to think that way. Well, how important is sleep, the nutrition, without getting crazy as a youth, and like the recovery piece?
Yeah, I know we were kind of talking about like an injury prevention model and that's where it starts. I think that's the most important thing. I think sleep should be your base in terms of recovery and regeneration. If you're not sleeping, you're not adapting. There's a lot of cognitive things that happen through rest and happen through different stages and sleep cycles. So it's important that you're going through those sleep cycles. So if you're going to bed late or waking up too early, or let's say you're playing video games too late, and that's going to impact the type of sleep and the quality of sleep that you're going to have. So sleep is probably one of the most important things if you want to stay healthy, if you want, you know, career longevity, life longevity. It's important that you are on top of that. And sleep monitors can be great, but I don't think they're necessary. I think if you know that sleep is important, and then you start being aware of when you're going to bed and when you're waking up and build some consistency around that and following some proper circadian rhythms, I think that's an easy first step. And the other thing, like sleep time is tough. It's different for everybody. There's some people out there that can survive off of little and some people that need more. And I think step number one is figure out what's optimal for you. And there's no real scientific way to do it, but I slept back 8 hours, I wake up, I feel great. That's probably optimal for me. I sleep 9 hours, I wake up and I feel lethargic, I feel crappy, I probably overrested. Versus if I sleep 6 hours or 7 hours and I don't feel fully rested. So it's just a trial and error process to figure out what's optimal for you. Where I think sleep monitoring devices can help is with sleep debt. So if you have one bad night's sleep, it doesn't mean you're going to be, you know, screwed for days and days and days. You can actually make that up as long as it's manageable debt. So if you missed 7 hours, it's going to take a long time to make up that 7 hours. But let's say your optimal night's sleep is 8 hours and I get 7 hours. So now I've incurred 1 hour of sleep debt. So again, this is where monitors can come into play. So then the next day when I wake up, I can either try and make that up through napping, or I can make that up through my next night's sleep. So if 8 hours is optimal, I know I've incurred 1 hour of sleep debt. So now I'm trying to aim for 9 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And you should look at things as an accumulative chunk. So look at things over the course of 7 days. So again, 8 hours, 56 hours is my optimal amount. That's what I want to achieve by the end of the week. It's not necessarily that bad if I only had 6 hours here, or if I had 9 hours here, 8 hours here, as long as it's balancing out. But if you start having a downward trend of 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours, so now you're incurring a lot of sleep debt, and it's going to take you sometimes weeks or months to make up that sleep debt.
Yeah.
So it's important that you figure out that sleep time and then build consistency around your sleep, which for us in the NHL is so hard to do because we play night games, and we could play a night game, finish at 11 o'clock at night, and then have to hop on a plane and fly, all the way across the country and into another country, and not get into our bed till 4 a.m. So that's a struggle for us, and that's something that we're always trying to balance out with the way we're scheduling practices, is how can we optimize that rest? Because if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering. That's first and foremost the number one thing. And there's tons of research, tons of studies. I can send you a bunch if you're interested, but it impacts performance. It impacts the cognitive performance and the physical performance. So sleep is your pillar. That's your number one. And then number two would be nutrition. And I think, and we kind of talked about this yesterday, I think nutrition is very confusing right now. I think the important thing is figure out the basics and stick to the basics. And the basics should be built around whole foods and eating consistently. So every 3 to 4 hours, you're eating meals, and those meals should look like food. If it grazes in the land, or if it grows from the land, then it's probably good to eat. If it's manufactured in the lab, probably stay away from it. Nutrition can be very confusing, but with nutrition, eating consistently, constantly feeding, make sure there's some kind of protein at every meal, whether that's animal-based or plant-based, make sure it's present. Your carbohydrates, you should look for high quality carbohydrates. So looking more towards like brown rices, sweet potatoes versus say white rices or white pasta. And those can be valuable too, if timed right. So if you're going to play a game, or if you have a heavy training session, you can go towards more of those simple carbs. So having the white starches in that. But for the most part, good rule of thumb is with your carbohydrates, make sure some kind of fiber is present. And then that will help with digestion. That will help with, keeping you full, all those kind of good things. And then, from there, vegetables, make sure vegetables are there. And we try and do it in a simple way. Like we have a plate system, and we have 3 different types of plates. And it's, did I do any activity? If not, you eat this plate. And that would be more vegetables, less carbohydrates, more protein. And then if you had more of, let's say, a training session, like an in-gym training session, but you didn't do a lot of cardio, then the plate's going to look fairly similar, probably just a little bit more carbohydrate than you have on that off-day plate, or that off-activity plate. And then your heavy plate. So your heavy plate would be a day where maybe you're training, maybe you're playing, or maybe you're just playing, and you're logging quite a bit of minutes. Then you want to be consuming a little bit more carbohydrate with that meal. But yeah, some quick take-homes there. I know nutrition is, that could be an hour-long conversation, but with nutrition, eat consistently, eat whole foods. If you have the option to go organic, go organic. If not, make sure you're washing your fruits and vegetables, and then make sure you have those 3 staples present at every single meal you have, but just manipulate those variables. So again, it's maybe more protein, less carbohydrate. Always eat vegetables. You can't overconsume on vegetables.
Right. That's a fantastic answer. I'm going to add to that because you said some references. So 2 books that I read, and they might be like the kindergarten of sleep, was Sleep Smarter and Why We Sleep. Those were a couple scientists. They came out with some good ones. Really good stuff in there. And really, for any of the kids and the parents out there that you're trying to explain sleep and really get a good understanding of it, it's mind-blowing, to be honest with you. Obviously your research on it is a lot deeper than mine. And the last thing with the nutrition that you were talking about, really it's very simple. We complicate it so much. And Charles Poliquin had a quote. He said, if it flies, if it runs, if it swims, and if it's green, eat it. If it isn't, don't.
Yeah.
and really for me, that simplified eating. because
Yeah.
basically, or if it has eyes, it's got a protein. If it had eyes before, it had protein. So if you look at whatever type of bar or a donut, it didn't have eyes before, so don't eat it. But
Sure.
if it was an egg, it came from someone with eyes. So it kind of simplified things for me.
Yeah.
Staying on that, Eric, can you just fire out the question regarding the supplements, since we're just talking a little bit about nutrition?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions we got was, are there any supplements you would recommend and for what purpose? Or are they unnecessary? So we could maybe talk about this for younger guys coming up, and then maybe for more advanced trainers if you want.
Yeah, for young guys coming up, figure out your diet first. Most of your fuel should come from, nutrition, from food, from whole foods. Supplements are more of a blanket. For us and at our level, we'll use them a little bit more, but we'll use them very specifically. So we use certain things at certain times, and we use certain things with certain people. So if we look at like blood testing, for example, there's a deficiency, then we'll try and address it through whole foods. If we can't, then maybe we'll add in a little bit of a supplement. Like we have one player who's celiac, so he's vitamin D deficient. So that's something that we supplement with him because it's important. And then, where we are, there's lack of sun. So we do supplement vitamin D, not quite at his level, but with everybody. So we'll do little things like that. But honestly, for me, figure out your nutrition first. You should be able to get pretty much everything you need out of your nutrition. From there, if you're having issues with cramping or if you're having issues with energy, you could look at adding a bit of an electrolyte. But I wouldn't go towards Gatorade or any products like that tend to be high in cheap sugars. I would go more towards like a BioSteel or a Noon or a Hydrolyte, something like that. But again, I don't think it's something that needs to be blanketed on everybody. A lot of cramping usually comes from a mineral deficiency in your diet, not necessarily hydration. So I would just make sure you're consuming enough water. Again, if maybe there's cramping or lack of energy, you could look at adding something there. Protein powders, I think if you have a whole food diet, I don't even think they're necessary. Maybe if you're getting a little bit older and you want to start putting on a little bit more size and you just can't consume enough, you could start putting some protein powders and that into your diet. Some more natural things that actually work really well, something like tart cherry. So tart cherry juice is a really good supplement. It's kind of like a natural anti-inflammatory. So it helps with swelling. So after a game, you're going to get a little bit of swelling. So it can help with that. Even a supplement, if you're looking for something more on the performance side, again, it's a natural product, but getting some beetroot juice. Beat It is a pretty good product. So what you're doing is supplementing nitrate. So nitrate will dilate your blood vessels, so allow more oxygen to get to the working muscles. So as a performance supplement, that could be a good one. And again, it's a whole food product. It's a natural product. So it's not like you're having something that's, overly manufactured.
Can you repeat the name of the Beat supplement?
Beat It is the supplement that I use. Yeah.
That
I use
could go a lot of ways.
Yeah, I use that one because it actually discloses the amount of nitrate that's in there. Because if you want the performance effect, it's important that you have the right amount in the supplement. So I like that one. Another supplement that I don't mind, more on the performance side, that kind of tends to get a bad rap is creatine. Creatine is actually a pretty good supplement. Not something I would give to anyone under the age probably of 16. It can be a little bit tougher on the digestive system. So that would be something that I would give to somebody that's a little bit older. But otherwise, like all the vitamins and everything out there, like if you have a decent diet, if you're eating lots of fruits and vegetables, you should be getting most of that stuff through your whole foods.
Okay, yeah. So it's a simple.
Andy, sorry, I got another two here, just kind of in the same realm of what we're talking about. If I could just fire those off quick. So first thing actually on the supplements, that's good because I remember just coming up for me in junior when people start mentioning supplements. It's something that kind of sounds sexy and you can really get caught up in, I need to take some protein powder and all this stuff. So yeah, that's good information. Another question I just got is on sleep. How do players adjust their days if they do incur a sleep debt? So you're talking about maybe getting in at 4 a.m. Obviously that seems like a bit of an extreme example, but would you recommend maybe sleeping in or getting up, kind of staying with the routine you have on a game day or something like that?
Sleep in. Get to sleep.
Yeah. Perfect.
Don't pull somebody out of bed. Like, I know that's the parent thing to do, right? Is you don't want your kid lazing around, but if he's going to bed or she's going to bed at a decent time and, you know, they're sleeping in and you'd like them to be up a little bit earlier, they probably need it. If they're staying up and playing video games to 2, 3 a.m., you know, then I'm all for it, because I think then there's a lesson to be learned about establishing a little bit more of a consistent routine. But if you're consistently going to bed at 10 and you're waking up at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., like, you might be one of those people that just need more sleep. Those people exist. Most of us underestimate the amount of time we actually need to sleep. But there are those rare individuals that can serve. My wife is one of them. She's up at 5 a.m. and buzzing around, and I just can't do that. She's just different than I am, and we both go to bed early. So she just needs less sleep than I do to function.
It's almost being a tough guy, right? Being able to stay up late and get up early, you know, man at night, man in the morning, but it's actually killing you, like, in so many different ways.
The other thing to recognize is there are different people that follow different circadian rhythms. So there are night owls, people that do their best work at night. And then there are early risers, people that do their best work in the morning. And that's usually how you're just genetically built. You're just hardwired to be that way. So I think it is important to recognize that. So I don't think there is an optimal time to go to bed. I think there's an optimal time for everybody to go to bed. For me, I do my best work in the morning. I'm useless at night. I go to bed early. My wife would be the same thing, but I know, like, my assistant, for example, he's a night owl. He would rather go to bed at, 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and then sleep until 9, 10. And that's just his cycle. That's his routine that he's built. But at the end of the day, both of us are still acquiring the same amount of sleep.
Right on. Cool. That was awesome. Like, great start to this. Okay, let's talk about
I got one more thing. Sorry, Andy, on the nutrition.
No, it's all yours.
As a resource, TN Nutrition, John Berard, he's the guy.
I took his course.
Yeah, I was one of the first nutrition courses I took. But if you follow him on social media, he always posts some really good stuff, and he's good at taking something complex like nutrition and packaging it in a very simple way. So he'd be a guy, like, if anyone was interested in getting some information out of, he'd be a guy I'd definitely check out. Yeah,
you know what I loved about that course is that nutrition is still a bundle of information, but he simplifies it so much, and the course actually makes you think. Totally. Doesn't just tell you eat this, do this. He actually makes you think about it. It was a great course, and I would suggest to anybody, probably the first step, as I would agree with you, is to go to his Instagram. It's called Precision Nutrition, and you just almost daily they send you some stuff to think about, and just great stuff.
He's always firing out content. So really good follow.
Yeah, awesome. That was great advice. Okay, so let's say we're in our off season right now. Maybe not your team. We don't know, I guess. But in the off season,
we don't know what we're doing right now.
Neither do we really. But seeing that we're in the off season, we got again, it's the same question. It's some people have an understanding of what to do. Some parents are saying, they don't know what to do. But so the player, I always try to get the players to take some onus on themselves. So if we're looking at, so we're in May right now, mid-May we'll call it, and we'll go to September when the season starts. If you had a son, or if you were their coach, how would you structure their off-season plan? So what I mean by that is, would you start with a cardio? Would you start with building a base, getting strong, like that process more than anything?
Yeah. So I would definitely establish my off season. So time for me to rest, like where I'm not in the gym, I'm not playing hockey. I'm not saying you can't go do yoga or go do any kind of general fitness, go for a run, go do Pilates, go play a sport, go play soccer, go like that. That's your time to cross train. And I think that's important, is establish what that is. So for us, usually when our season ends, depending on how far you go, like a playoff year is quite a bit different than a year that you're done playing hockey in April. But, we're usually around 2 to 3 weeks where it's like, stay away, do nothing, enjoy your family, go for walks, go for hikes, go do yoga, whatever floats your boat. So I think that's important at all ages, is to figure out when that is. It's an important time to mentally and physically, recuperate. Then from there, I go into what we call as our general preparation phase. And I think a lot of people skip this and they get right to the sexy stuff. And your general preparation is very non-sexy, and it's not the type of training you always want to do, but it's kind of your physical reset. So in that general preparation phase, like when we play hockey, we get pulled into a certain posture. And a lot of muscles get inhibited, so they get turned off and they don't get worked the way they should. So that's your time to start re-strengthening that and start rebalancing your body. I remember, I think I heard this from Brett Bartholomew is the guy's name. He's a strength coach. I actually worked with Cass one summer when he was down in the
speaks
States.
very high level.
Yeah, and so he used an analogy of like a fishing rod. So if you have a fishing rod and you have all these lines kind of coming off every direction, the fishing rod, so hockey will start pulling us in a certain direction. So we start getting the rounded shoulders, we start getting the collapsed shoulders, the collapsed chest, our hips kind of start going in, our hips get depressed or compressed. So what we want to do in that time is try and get that fishing rod. So all those lines are pulling us forward. We want to try and get that fishing rod rebalanced. So it's working more on the posterior chain, working more on the shoulders, reestablishing some strength through the groin, trying to free up the joint, the capsule, the hip capsule. So that would kind of be my focus early on. And then with that, I'd complement that with isometric work, some longer isometrics. Again, boring stuff, not very fun, painful in its own way. But when you do isometrics, then you're able to get into the tendon and start training the tendon a little bit more as opposed to just the muscle and just the nervous system. And then with that, when you're holding those positions for a longer time, you get this incredible amount of internal pressure. And if you add external weights, and that pressure goes up, and then your heart rate goes up. So now you're getting a little bit of an aerobic effect. So in my GPP phase, I want to rebalance the body. I want to work through the tendon a little bit more. I want to work a little bit more aerobically as opposed to anaerobically that we usually do throughout the course of the season. And then I want to reestablish a little bit of work capacity. So for some young athletes, I would build in a little bit of like hypertrophy, so some muscle building into that too. So those would be my 4 big rocks that I would do early on. Yeah. And then as you get into the next phase, yeah.
So my question, not my question, just so maybe less experienced people understand it. An isometric simply means that you're holding a pose or holding a squat or whatever. And hypertrophy means that you're putting on size.
Exactly.
So those 2 things. In case anybody is wondering what those 2 words mean, I just need to look smart a little bit here. I just trying to keep up to the Joneses here, dude. Okay, so next phase. Sorry, go.
Yeah, so then my next phase would be more like my specific development, so kind of like a strength phase. So I'm starting to build out the qualities that are important to hockey. We're starting to work a little bit more strength. We're starting to work a little bit more on power. And I design my days so they're going after certain things. So tempoing is important in that phase. So doing some of the shorter, heavier isometrics, doing some of the shorter eccentrics. So working now a little bit more on motor control, having a velocity-based day where I'm trying to move a little bit quicker. So I have different themes to my days, but specific but non-specific. And what I mean by that is I'm squatting, so I'm building strength for hockey, but it's not necessarily a hockey movement. So that's where I'm trap bar deadlifting, I'm squatting, doing more things like that. And then once I get into my next phase, now I'm starting to get a little bit more specific in my sport. So it's going to transfer to my sport a little bit better. So my loads start getting a little bit lighter, my velocities, my speeds start getting a little bit faster. I start working in more angles that look like hockey. So I'm doing more lateral stuff. I'm doing more crossovers in that position. I might be doing more sprints, whether that's on ice or off ice. I'm trying to match things specific to the sport. So I'm trying to get more external rotation and extension of my leg. And then with that, I'm trying to match ground contact times of the sport. So for example, running. So running, if you do sprinting, longer sprints, the ground contact time is really quick. You don't see that in hockey. We have a longer ground contact time. So it's more push and glide, more push and glide. So I'm doing more exercises that reflect that. So if I want to work more on speed development, I might be doing some hill work. So the nice thing about hill work is it forces a little bit more of a lean angle, similar to what you see in hockey. And then it forces more ankle dorsiflexion. So it forces your ankle to do this, which is important for hockey to get more skate blade. And then the ground contact times are a little bit longer, right? Because of the resistance of the hill. So now that matches the sport a little bit more, and I can work in different angles. I don't always have to work straight up the hill. I can go backwards up the hill. I can go lateral up the hill. I can crossover up the hill. So that's kind of what I mean by more sport specific. And then the last phase, I'm trying to even decrease my loads even more. I'm trying to increase those velocities, those speeds even more. And then I'm also adding days where I'm having a little bit more capacity. So similar to like what we did in the GPP phase, so more that like the hypertrophy, those higher rep exercises. Now I'm starting to put those back in low doses, not high doses, because now I'm skating a ton. And at that time of year, it's all about skating. It's all about hockey. That's the most important thing. Your fitness program should be complementing it, not interfering with it that time of year. And then with all that, I'm still thinking about hockey. So hockey is still my primary focus. That's the reason why I'm training. So now how do I complement my on-ice stuff with now what I'm doing in the gym? And kind of a simple way of putting it is in season, it's more tactical, where in the off season, you can be a little bit more technical. So working with someone like yourself, you know, developing some of those soft skills that you might lose and develop bad habits during the season, you want to reestablish those. So I think it's important to know what your on ice goal is and then go after it, because you can be more specific with it in the off season. In season is all about team stuff. It's all about systems, where the off season could be more about you. So that piece is important not to forget, because at the end of the day, we want everything we do in the gym to transfer onto the ice. So if we're hyper focusing on one or the other, we're not going to get that transfer of the two modalities.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's say someone's listening here, and they're a dad that's never really played sports, or played a little bit, have a little bit of knowledge, which is always dangerous. They just listen to what they said, what you just said, and they go, "Okay, I don't have a clue now," because that was like deep.
That's a loaded question. It was a loaded question. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
Version of a loaded question.
Totally not your fault. That was answered absolutely perfectly. But I'm just saying, like, because you know, you could sit down with people forever and say, okay, I just really don't understand, or is it okay if my son that's 13 years old or 15 years old just works his nuts off? Anyways, will he recover? Will it be okay? So the perfect world is what you put out, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, I'm trying to think of the word. How detrimental would it be if someone just had in their body, their mental attitude is just, I'm just going to work really hard as a youth,
Yeah,
not as a 20-year-old
kid. That kid than the other kid.
Yeah.
You know, the nice thing about working with that kid is I'd rather pull people back than try and encourage them and drag them with me, right?
Yeah.
So I like those kids. Just make sure you surround yourself with good help and then trust that help.
Yeah.
Right? Like, more isn't always better. The one thing about kids versus adults, we have to be a little bit more concerned about how we manage volume and intensity in that, just because we're a little bit older, we're less aerobic, our qualities are starting to taper off. So we have to be more specific on the way we dose, where with kids, they're so aerobic by nature, and they'll develop their bodies. Everything is absorbing information in that. So they'll usually still learn and thrive. But I think the important thing for those kids is think about longevity, right? You want to be doing this for a long time, not a short time. So if you want to do it for a long time, you have to make sure you're balancing your training out and you're not overdoing it. You're not overkilling it. So in the off season, and when I say be on the ice, I'm not saying you should be on the ice 5 days a week. It's, let's say you're done playing in May or April. Let's say you're done playing in April and you're not going to be playing till the end of August, like with your team, formal hockey. I think within that time frame, you're looking for very specific things, and you're avoiding stuff like shitting where you're building bad habits, and you're avoiding practices where you're just doing what you do all the time. So that's your time to work on other things. So it's whether it's with a skill coach or on your own, or maybe a skate coach, if skating is something that you have to work on, then you're taking a gradual approach to it. So let's say you're in June, maybe you're only on the ice twice a week. July, maybe you're on the ice 3 times a week. And then August, maybe you're on the ice 4 times a week. And now what you've done is actually establish an off season where you can recover. And then you've gradually rebuilt your capacity. So then by the time you're back playing hockey, you can handle the demands of the game.
Yeah, so that was awesome, and it's something that I preach. So one of the things I said, if we go just hockey, a lot of people will look at a hockey practice, they'll go to a hockey camp or a hockey school, and like I use this term all the time. Any idiot can make you sweat and not breathe. You don't have to be smart to do that.
Simplest thing to do.
Simplest thing to do.
Exercise on the board.
Right.
That's it. It drives me. Yeah, it drives me crazy. Some of those camps. I'm probably going to get some backlash here, but you're right. Like most of those camps are about making money.
Yes.
Right. So it's about volume. And then I go out and I watch these kids in these camp, and there's like a 20-to-1, like there's 20 people on the ice and there's one instructor, and they spend half the time standing in line and just waiting, where they would have been better off going out on the ice by themselves, and they would have got way more puck contacts.
Yeah.
Right. So they're losing out on actual contacts because there's a business that's interfering with their development. And so if you're looking, and I'm not saying all camps are bad, but if you're out there and it's a group setting and what you do looks like practice, it's the wrong time of year. Like there's a time and a place for that. So make sure you do your homework with, who's running the course and then what the format is for that course.
Yeah, very, very, very important. I'm contemplating, or I started writing for my newsletters, a series on this, because as you said, with fitness, there's phases. And when you come in here and you do isometrics, or you're working on the hips and all these things, you're not sweating that much. It's kind of easy, but it's necessary. So the same with the off season as hockey. In hockey, I say this to people all the time, is like, you can go on the ice, more is not better. You have to be specific. So you have to look at your scope of things, just like you do in fitness. Or am I not fast? So I'm going to have to do some speed work, or if my hips are bad, I got to work my hips. On the ice, if you've got it's okay to go on the ice early in the spring and work on, honing in on real specific shooting or skating technique or a stick handling technique. Or if you're a D, learning how to have a specific way to retrieve pucks. That's quality work. But to go out there with someone that blows a whistle and just wants you to sweat and yells at you like, go harder, it's useless. It's absolutely useless. It's actually detrimental.
No,
so I'm glad you said that.
They're getting hurt, right? Is when the volume and intensity isn't appropriate to the time of the year, and it's not being managed appropriately. Like there's so many injuries that come from that. So I hear you.
So sticking with that just a little bit, what are the non-negotiables that you have as far as injury prevention? Because you mentioned longevity in hockey.
Eat right.
Okay, good enough.
That's your staple. That's got to be, like, if you're thinking of a pyramid, like that's your foundation, that's your base. You got to figure that out, and then everything else comes easy. So if I was building my pyramid, I'd probably have my sleep and nutrition on the bottom, sleep first, nutrition second. And then after that, I would have appropriate dosed activity for the appropriate time of year. That's another loaded conversation there, but doing the right things in the right amount at the right times is important. And then after that, you would have all the stuff that we would do in the gym. You'd have all your hip mobility stuff, your core stability stuff, your T-spine, whatever it is that particular person needs to work on. And then the very peak would be probably recovery modalities. So like using stuff like, Normatech, like Firefly, stuff like that. And I'm not putting therapy in there. I'm talking more just about recovery tools, recovery modalities, foam rolling, stuff like that. So that would be my order of importance. So sleep, nutrition, control volume and intensity, all those preventative exercises, and then recovery modalities would be your order of importance. All important, but some more than other.
For sure. Great. I've been spending a lot more time doing mobility stuff, hips, shoulders, T-spine, lower back, and I feel 1,000% better. And it's, you know what, I've always resisted in my life, probably made a big difference of the results of my career.
Yeah.
But I agree. And my body moves a little bit better. I mean, I'm a 51-year-old man, so it's only going to move so well, but it makes a huge difference. So again, kids and parents, when you're looking at things like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it would be a bad thing to spend time during the day to do some hip mobility and T-spine stuff, like almost on a daily basis, or is that a little bit too much?
No, moving's good. Like our joints and everything get compressed. So the best anti-inflammatory is movement. So daily movement, like a daily little dynamic series would be great just to feel good, moves. Like it has a restorative effect to it too, because it's aerobic in nature. So if you did 10 different movements and it took you 15 minutes, and let's say you're working up and down a stretch of grass or turf or whatever, so by moving, you're moving fluid. So blood starts to move, a metabolic waste starts to move, you start freeing up space in your joints. So yeah, there's absolutely no harm in developing a good routine daily to do. And, you know, whether that's something that you do right before you go on the ice, I think that's great, or something that you do on the off days. You know, all that stuff is really good. You know, even just playing sports, like having something else that you do, going out and play, you know, soccer, you know, it's fun, it's different. There's a social component to it, and you move and you get all that other stuff, as long as you're not overdoing it, right? That can have some restorative benefits to it too. And it's fun, right? You get to compete and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, that stuff is good as well. The one thing I would say though, for younger athletes, and this is kind of a trend I'm starting to see, is stretching. I wouldn't overly stretch with young athletes unless there's an issue that, let's say, a professional therapist or someone has identified. Then I think you can go after it. But I think stretching is something more for older athletes, especially with young athletes. So as you're developing, especially males, your femur grows before your muscles, before your quads and your hamstrings and all that kind of stuff. So it's actually on constant tension until it catches up in the development phase. So when you're young, it's actually a good time to work more on speed, because those tendons and muscles are so taut. And that's why most boys, when you get them to try and touch their toes, they can't do it. It's because of their physical makeup. And you don't want to start getting in there and stretching, because those muscles are on stretch to begin with. So if you start pulling at them even more, you can actually start to do some damage. So that's actually a good time to take advantage of the speed work, is, you know, when the athletes are younger and they're physically developing and they're neurologically developing as well.
Yeah, the central nervous system will be a little bit more adaptable to the speed work and stuff too, right? Like
yeah,
at this age,
and that's where like
age.
the dynamic movement or activation stuff is a little bit better. And, you know, with kids, like I'm sure in your world you hear a lot of mobility versus stability. Like with kids, I'd rather go after stability. So I'd rather go after getting strong and getting solid in these different positions, these awkward positions, as opposed to worry about stretching something, right? So if you think of, like, you do a lateral lunge, I would rather do a lateral lunge, have an isometric, or have a little bit of an external load where you're working on getting strong in that position, as opposed to try and stretch out my groins or my hamstrings or something like that. So there's different forms of mobility work. Just make sure you're implementing the right one.
Right on. That's awesome. That's great. That's great advice. So what about in season? A kid works hard. Edmonton Oiler works hard, and they come into the season. And how do you keep up your strength and the shape that you're in this summer? I know it's going to diminish a little bit, but what do you do, or what would you recommend for strength training or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think it's important to build some consistency with your off ice routine. You know, a lot of these young kids, they you know, get a strength coach, and that they work with their strength coach in the off season, and then the season starts and they don't do anything. They're going to lose a lot of those gains. So it's important to work on maintaining them throughout the course of the year, but your prescription is going to be completely different. So how much you do, what you do, and when you do is going to be way different. So like if you wanted to do a little bit of strength work, you should build that according to your schedule. So let's say you play on Saturday, for example. You want to do that as furthest away from that game as you can, as long as there's recovery built in. So let's say we played Saturday, Sunday. Monday should be my off day. Tuesday could be another restorative day. Maybe you talk about the dynamic movement, maybe a light skate. And then let's say Wednesday is your hard skate. I would pair my strength work with my Wednesday. And then Thursday I would do as a down day, so I have time to recover. And then on my Thursday, I would do my power workout, and then Friday off, and then play Saturday. So then my power workout, I want to keep that as close to my game as possible, because then that will potentiate me into that game. So that will give me more power leading into the game versus doing strength work, which is a little bit slower, a little bit more damaging. So that's why I want to keep that as far away from the game as possible. And then you do that in very microdosed amounts. So your strength work honestly might be, let's say you do a squat, for example, you might only do 2 sets of 3. And that could be your entire workout. So you do a warm up and then you do 2 sets of 3, and that could be your strength workout. And then your power lift on that Friday, or sorry, on the Thursday, that could be something as simple as maybe some box jumps, right? And again, like maybe 3x3 or something like that. So you're not overdoing it. You don't want to negatively impact the game. You want to be able to hold on to all those qualities that you worked on in the off season, and not negatively impact, your on ice performance, positively impact it. So that's where, what you do and how much you do is important. So like for us with the Oilers, we take a microdosed approach, which is that small amount of training. And then for us, we're very specific on how we do it, because we do all this testing. So we might have one guy in the gym doing, power work with heavier loads, and one guy doing his power work with lighter loads. So we do a little more customization. I think with younger kids, you want to be a little bit more general, work on those general qualities. And then as you get older, you're starting to get more specific with how you're doing your strength and your power work.
Yeah. Yeah. The maintenance piece was right in line what I read with Poliquin's work, is maintaining with a couple sets, nothing crazy, like 2, 3, 4 reps, just to maintain your brain's telling your muscles, yeah, you still got it, right? Like just communicating with each other.
Totally. And we monitor our power off of force plate. And, ever since we've got it, we've actually been able to show the coaches and the staff through what we do, we can actually hold on to that power throughout the course of the year. Because we don't really have any guys that are losing power. And if they do, it tends to be because they're doing too much, not because they're not doing enough.
Awesome. I'm going to ask the next question, and then Eric will take a couple other questions from the audience. And then we got about 15 minutes. So one of the questions was what exercises, do you have a few exercises that would work on speed, specifically the first 3 steps?
You like your loaded questions.
Oh yeah, it's never easy with me.
Unfortunately, it's a complex answer. I'll try and simplify it. So factors that contribute to speed is, and I'm going to order this in importance. Mechanics is number 1. So if you're an ugly skater, you're not going to be a fast skater. So if you're going to address something, start there. And that's where I mean, like in the off season, blending things together. So in season, you don't get a chance to work on that. So maybe you're working with an edge coach or a speed coach, but it should be in your environment. So if you do something in the track, if you're sprinting, or I use the example of running hills, it's specific, but it's still not specific. So if you want to work on mechanics, don't work on running mechanics, work on hockey mechanics. The skill set is completely different.
Sure.
So that would be number 1, work on mechanics. Number 2 would be force. So again, we use the force plate. So if we have a guy that's generating a ton of force, I know I don't have to work on building more. But if I have a guy that's not generating a lot of force, then I can start working a little bit more on force application, and then digging a little bit deeper, whether that's more of a power or a strength thing. And then the third thing would be posture stability. So you can make guys faster by building a little bit of core strength. Like if they're puppy soft in their midsection and they're collapsing, that's going to negatively affect their mechanics and their force production. Because now if I start rounding, then my glutes are going to start turning off and I can't push through my glutes.
Right.
So those would be my big 3 pillars in terms of building speed. So to me, if you want to get faster, let's say it's an off-season application, you work on mechanics, find a really good coach that knows how to actually work on mechanics and progress mechanics throughout the course of the season. And with the mechanics, make sure there's a point where you're going fast. It's not just drill and kill. It's you have to go fast. If you want to be fast, you have to skate fast. Do that in the environment. And then mix that with a well-balanced strength program. So doing strength for a period of time and then making that transition to power, and then work on your core stability. So if you're covering everything, that would cover your basis. But if you have the ability to do a little bit more testing, or if you have a good coach that understands skating mechanics and skating speed, then maybe you can kind of look at, taking a couple of those things off and maybe just focusing on 1 or 2 of them as opposed to all 3. But it would be those 3 things in terms of trying to build speed. So there's not one drill. It's just work on those 3 things: mechanics, power, core stability.
Yeah, it's actually the number one question. Like whether for hockey players, it's
faster, right?
Well, it's almost like sometimes coaches themselves will give feedback because it's just an easy answer too. Like I can't even tell you how many guys that they go to they've talked to a scout or they come back from a junior camp or a junior season and I'll talk to their coach and they'll say, yeah, he's got to work on his footwork. What does that mean? Yeah, what is it? You just said that too, right? What does it mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the easy answer, work on your footwork. And it makes you sound really smart. But when you actually ask why a couple of times, they're like, well, the footwork. No, I'll do what I do. But so that question is very loaded. And I think
to cut you off, but even most footwork drills, like let's say ladder drills, for example, you're not going to get faster doing a ladder drill. It's too non-specific. It's not going to help a hockey player. I don't mind ladder drills for warm-ups because you're just moving in different directions. You're getting your core temperature up, and that's fine, but you're not going to get faster on a ladder. It has to be specific. It has to be specific. And if you have the ability to break that down, then it makes it easier to train for. So it might be an eccentric quality. It might be a concentric quality relative to power. It might be force. It might be velocity. So there's different areas within that realm. I think as you start getting a little bit older, you can start getting a little bit more specific. But at the end of the day, in that category, I think it's important to build the right amount of strength for your sport, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm pretty big on the eccentric and the deceleration because like in hockey, you're changing speeds a lot. I think a lot of the times, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you don't, when people think of speed or quickness, they think of fast turnover, which is definitely part of it. But what can offset that a little bit is also generating like a lot of force to get to a place, right?
Totally.
The eye test doesn't always count.
No, and sometimes turnover can be part of that force category. And that's what I mean, the velocity versus force. So force being more strength-based exercises, velocity would be faster exercises, which would help with that turnover. Because sometimes guys are just really slow on that recovery leg, right? Like they get into full extension, then it takes them a really long time to get that leg back underneath the body. So those guys, you can work more on velocity. So that's where you're applying faster exercises in the gym. And then on the on-ice stuff, that's where you're focusing even more on drills where you're going fast. And if you have somebody that's experienced with an older athlete, you might even consider doing some overspeed stuff with that particular player.
Yeah.
But I get that question all the time, and I always laugh before I say something because it's such a loaded question. It's not that simple. There's not one magical exercise out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's, it ends up being simple. Like one of the other things you could always think about, if you train like a 95-year-old lady, you're probably not going to be fast. Train fast.
At the end of the day, do that. Like it can be such a, like I come from the track and field world, and that can be a big mistake with track and field is you do all these sexy drills and you get really good at drills, but you don't know how to put it together. So it's important that you have pieces in there where you're running fast. And it's same with trying to get fast in hockey. You have to have pieces in there where you are skating fast.
Yeah. One more thing for you. was telling you, I was speaking, had Delestro on about a month ago from San Jose. We were talking about speed quite specifically. I mentioned to him, I did some reading from Boyle, Mike Boyle. Is it Mike Boyle? Yeah.
Yep, Mike Boyle.
He was talking about the flying 10s and flying 20s. I don't know, you're probably familiar with those. And Delestro said, yeah. And he said, contrast training would be as beneficial, or maybe more beneficial.
Yeah. So I do quite a bit of that in the gym. So it's basically pairing, let's say, a strength exercise that's going to potentiate, so make your, let's say, plyometric exercise, if it's a complex that's complemented with that, that's going to make that better. And the nice thing about doing that is, though, as long as you're picking the right plyometrics that match the ground contact times for hockey, that's a great way to work on speed in the gym, because you're taking a strength drill, a force-based drill, and then you're teaching the athlete right away how to apply it. So it's like me talking about just doing track drills and you never run fast. It's the same thing. If you just do squatting and you never move fast, then it's not going to apply well. There won't be a lot of transfer. So yeah, complex, contrasting, French contrasting, those work really well. Yeah. And then with fly sprints, what Mike Boyle was talking about, they can be well. So for those that don't know, fly sprints is you're going slow, you have a little bit of lead up, and then you excel, which is hockey. Like, for the most part, unless there's a whistle, we're always in motion, we're always gliding, we're always moving. So you have to go from a glide or a slower stride to an acceleration. So that's kind of what he's referring to working on. But again, the best place to do it is in the environment. You want to do that on ice where you have skates on and you're working with skating mechanics, all that kind of stuff. If you have to, running's okay, as long as you keep your distance shorts. Because shorter distance, you stay in that acceleration phase, so you're lean forward and you have those kind of shorter, heavier ground contact times. Where as you start coming out of the acceleration phase and you're going, those ground contact times become more vertical and they become shorter. So if you think of a 100-meter race, right? The first little bit, they come out of the blocks and they're like this. More specific for hockey, once they get north of like 20 meters, then they start getting a little bit more upright, and then less specific for hockey.
Right. So all the kids out there that train with me, and we do those 505s, what I call 505s on the ice, and you hate them, that's what this is about, is that quick burst of speed from a glide and a change of direction to redo it. So when you look at me and you start calling me names behind my back, because I know you all do it, there's a purpose, okay? This guy's not a total idiot. All right, so so Eric, you want to fire out a few questions to and Chad, this has been fantastic so far. Learning a ton from you.
Yeah. So I got a bunch here, and they're kind of all over the map. So first one I want to touch on. Can you talk about differences between training for aesthetic and training for performance, and how people kind of get those two things confused sometimes?
Yeah. So look like Tarzan, perform like Jane. So the aesthetics would be more your bodybuilding stuff, like working on your biceps and working on your triceps and working on different parts of your delts and working on different parts of your chest, your pecs. That would be more the aesthetic stuff versus the stuff that will actually apply to sport. So in sport, you want to do more like push, pull, rotate, hinge, squat, and then lateral squat. So those would be your pillars of movement. And those are all pretty integrated movements. You know, even something like a bench press for the right person, I actually think a bench press is a good exercise that gets a bad rap as long as there's context around it. So if you just did bench press on its own, it probably won't apply. But if you do what we were talking earlier by having like complexes and contrasts in with it, and adding the power element and learning how to move fast and learning how to drive and doing stuff more erect, more upright to complement that can work well. But with that bench press exercises, I'm talking about maybe doing that once or max twice a week with one drill, as opposed to, say, the figure side, which would be, okay, I'm going to do an incline press today. I'm going to do a flat press today. I'm going to do a decline press today, where I'm working on different parts of my chest and I'm getting it to pop out, right? We want to work more on the power side, which is just doing that one powerful movement, that pressing movement, and not overdo, the amount of it.
Awesome.
Speaking of that, there's one of the big things I have with the young guys is obviously they want to get, they want to look good, they want to get size, and more and more. I mean, you got to be strong. In fact, I'm sure you can attest to this. Yamamoto on your team, Zach was telling me, he goes, if you look at this guy, you'd say there's no way this guy can play hockey. He's just a little shit, right? And he goes he's like 5'7", 5'8" tops, just a 150 maybe, but he's powerful. So that's unbelievable. Yeah. So, I think the biggest concern, I've said this before, is just kind of be who you are. Don't worry about necessarily being bigger, because if you're pushing to be bigger, it's probably going to be a detriment because your body is what it is.
Well, that was always the thing early on with S&C, is like, you got to cut or you got to grow. And it's going to negative. If your body isn't comfortable at those weights and comfortable performing at those weights, that's what I meant earlier when I said, look like Tarzan. You look great, but you perform like Jane because you're not doing actual performance stuff. And that muscle, all that extra muscle is weight. And then it also requires a lot of oxygen, a lot of blood to be able to function. So it's going to negatively impact you. You won't be able to move the same. You'll get tired quicker. So it's not always good. And with gaining size, it has to be a gradual process, and you have to have the right frame for it. So like Darnell Nurse, for example, when we first got him, he's a massive frame. He's got wide shoulders. He's tall. He's long. He had potential to grow. So we took a little bit more of an aggressive approach, putting weight on him, because we knew his frame could handle it. We were averaging probably like 8 pounds a year. And he went from like 190 when we drafted him to 220. And since then, he actually feels a little bit more comfortable lighter. So he's been playing about 215 the past season, just because he feels way better at that weight. So he kind of found what was comfortable for him. But at the end of the day, he had a frame where he could put on size. Where Yamamoto, he hasn't grown since we've got him. And I don't want to. Like he's got narrow shoulders, he's short, he's got little wrists, he's got little hands. He just doesn't have the growth potential as somebody like Darnell Nurse. So with him, I'm just going to negatively impact him, not positively impact him, because it's going to be non-specific as opposed to specific. I'd rather be specific and for him to play with his frame. But that kid, man, he's got a chip on his shoulder. And one thing, he was telling me he wrestled as a kid, and he said it in an interview. My assistant brought it up to him, and he's like, that's the reason why I'm so gritty and I can be feisty and battle and that on the ice is from when I wrestled. And so me and him are joking around, and I'm not a big guy, but I still have 15 pounds on him. So then me and him start wrestling, and this little guy took me down so quick, man. He had unbelievable strength for his frame. Like he is a strong kid. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I've known Zach, like I've been training Zach and Dalton since they're 12 years old. And Zach went into junior as 16 years old, 200 and some pounds, big kid. Like for the time, it was actually a good thing. But if you look at him now, and even Dalton, like Dalton's a monster. There's one story I always talk about is Dalton when he eats. It's hilarious. He peels a banana and shoves the whole thing in his mouth. He's just he's a tank. But they're becoming, like, if you look at, like, when I hadn't seen them in a while, I'm like, guys, you need to get something in your system because they're becoming slim. And, it's just a different thing now. It's all about being fast, not necessarily about being.
Well, and that's one thing I didn't bring up with the speed stuff, but your frame will impact that. Like if you just look at race cars, it's all about big engine, small frame, right? So they want to be as powerful as possible, but they want that frame to be as light as possible. Sprinting's the same thing. Those 100-meter sprinters, they're only like that. Andre DeGrasse is 155 pounds. Like they're not big guys. They're ripped, so they look like Adonises, but they're not very big guys. Right. So having that lighter frame, you'll move better. You'll be more agile. You'll be quicker. So that's the trend, right? And that's the reason why our game is looking faster and faster, is because guys are training that way now. And frame body composition is definitely part of it. Not all of it, but definitely part of it.
Yeah. And for the kids that are big, it's okay too. If you're a big frame, you're a big frame.
Yeah, it's all good. Totally. It's relative to you, right? Like if you're a big kid, you're a big kid. But like Cass is a big kid, but Cass only plays at like 206 pounds. So he found the comfortable weight, his fastest weight. And that's kind of around that 206 marker.
Yeah. Okay, Eric, another one?
Awesome. Yeah. So next one we got, as a pro athlete dealing with the current work stoppage, how would you recommend tailoring an in-season maintenance workout regimen with an uncertain return date? And then kind of branching off that, if the season is canceled, how would you deal with a prolonged off season?
Yeah, it's been weird. So right off the bat, everything was like, we got to get programming to the guys. Like this could last 2 weeks, it could last 3 weeks. We got to make sure we're fit. We got to make sure we're staying in shape. So like within 2 days, we had a program in all the guys' hands, one that was customized to their house. And then with about a week later, I was ordering tons of equipment. I was lending tons of equipment from my space out. And then we built our next program. And now we're about 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, and things aren't looking great, right? Things are looking more at like a long-term return as opposed to a short-term return. So then we got together as a group and we decided that, our messages and what we're going to encourage the guys is to actually use this as your downtime. So we're going to establish a bit of an off time to recover, time to regenerate. And we did that. And that was about a 3-week block. And now on May 4th, I think was the Monday, we got a new program in their hands. And now we're starting to ramp things back up, focusing more around intensity as opposed to volume. So shorter, high intense stuff as opposed to long, more aerobic stuff. We've already done a little bit of that. And the thought behind that is once we get back to skating, they'll be able to handle the high intensity, and then we'll progress. We'll plan our practices. So we'll start with a little less volume, and then we'll slowly progress that over time. So by the time we get back to playing, we should be, around a normal week. So we should be used to playing, 3 to 4 times a week and practicing, 1 or 2 times a week on top of that. So that's how we're going to rebuild them back into hockey.
Tricky one.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. I think this is an important one. So if you don't have access or can't afford a coach that maybe has as much knowledge as you do, Chad, where should someone go to learn and maybe come up with a decent enough program for themselves?
Yeah, there's good people out there. I think one thing you can do is find that coach and get them to put a program together for you. Like programs are relatively inexpensive. Like the trainer, I know what I would be doing is I would be doing a test session, and then I would be doing a one-on-one session where I'm walking them through the program, familiarizing them with the program. And then from there, I would provide it. So it would take me maybe 2 sessions to put together something that's custom for that guy. And then they can go off and go in their own gym, at home, whatever they have available for training space, and then do check-ins, right? So I kind of talked about 3 phases basically throughout the summer. So meet with that trainer, get that first phase. So maybe I do 4 weeks on my own, and then maybe there's a little recovery period of a week there. And then I meet back up with that trainer. I get the next phase, and then maybe 4 weeks, have a little bit of a down week, and then get a new program, and then have my next 4 weeks leading into the season. So to me, that would be a relatively affordable way to get some good coaching and good instruction. So yeah, that would probably be the smartest way. Otherwise, you can always go out there and try and educate yourself. The problem is like social media can be so misleading and confusing, totally. And everyone, like you'll see Zach Cassian will post a picture of him doing an Olympic lift or something. Everyone's like, I got to do that, and they start doing it without knowing the context and the reason why. And that might have fit perfectly into where he was in his programming, but not necessarily where a 13-year-old would fit in his programming, right? So using social media can be challenging, but if you can find some smart people out there to follow, that's not a bad way to gain some information. But again, they're only giving a piece of information and not the entirety of it, right? Like they're saying this exercise is great and this is why, but you still don't really understand on how to apply that exercise and when to apply that exercise.
Right.
So I think the best thing would be find some help and somebody that's willing to put a program together for you. And if you're intrinsically motivated, then go at it on your own, and then do check-ins every once in a while to make sure you're moving in the right direction and make sure your body is, responding positively, not negatively.
Yeah, great advice.
Awesome. So last question, kind of to wrap it up here. Talked about a lot of things. Do you have any main resources, maybe even if you want to reiterate the ones you said before, diet, people that can, relate concepts about training, or any other resource you think that would be useful for people to know about kind of moving forward?
Yeah, so sleep, Cheri D Ma would be somebody that's really good to check out. Brandon Marcello is another guy that does quite a bit around sleep. So I'd recommend them. Nutrition, I think John Berardi is probably the best. I think he does an unbelievable job of, like I said, taking something that's complex and making it simple. And that should be our approach, is simple. He would be really good. Good guy out there. He puts out a ton of content. Cal Dietz, really good guy. He's at a University of Minnesota, works with a bunch of cool guys.
Really good.
Puts out a lot of good information. He's got a book called Triphasic.
Yeah,
he read it with another guy, or he wrote it with another guy, Ben Peterson. I actually base a lot of my general preparation phase off of what Ben Peterson put together. And he was the performance director. At first, he was with Catapult, so he was my Catapult rep. That's how I met him. And then he got hired on with Philadelphia as their performance director. And now he's with San Francisco 49ers. So those are two really good guys. You mentioned Mike Boyle. I think Mike Boyle is a good resource. Brett Bartholomew. Brett Bartholomew is more kind of in the coaching world. That's more the content that he puts out there. But he's a really good guy to follow. Those are a lot of my resources are more for probably strength coaches and performance guys.
Yeah.
But not saying that you can't go out there and, learn yourself. But I think Triphasic is a really good book in terms of strength training. That's a good one to start with.
Yeah. Who?
Louis Simmons is another guy. West Side Barbell. So that's more the powerlifting side of things. But he has some really neat principles that he applies into what he does. And I use a lot of those principles. So variability is a big one. So he always changes, in powerlifting, they train the squat, the deadlift, and the bench press. And he trains a lot of variations within, or variability within those different movements to prevent injury and to promote stuff like growth hormone. He'd be another guy. He's a simple read. A guy if you want to get more complex with it, Ferguson would be another guy. He wrote Game Changers, The Process. Those are really good books to read in application. Really good. If you're a coach, if there's any coaches listening, he'd be the guy I definitely check out. Process, Game Changers, really good books. Talks about blending the performance stuff. I talked about that routine, that weekly routine of doing strength training further out from the game, and then power training closer to the game. He does a lot around tactical periodization. So how to manage your week. So on the ice, when am I doing more intense stuff versus when am I doing higher volume stuff versus when am I doing my higher cognitive stuff? So my learning stuff, how does that place throughout the week? So I'm managing my fatigue to optimize my performance on the weekend. Fergus Conley is his name. Really good, like I said, for any coaches that are out there.
Awesome. Triphasic Dietz was brought up with DeLustro when he was on.
Yeah.
So I did some research on him. Very good.
Yeah, no, he's good. He spits out a ton of content.
Yeah. So that's all I got over here. That was an awesome way to wrap up, because we actually did have some guys asking about strength coaching and things like that. So that's an awesome way to wrap up. So that's it for me, Andy.
Yeah. Well, Chad, I'm going to let you go and get back to that awesome facility you have and train nobody. But,
exactly.
I want to thank you so much. I'm gonna follow up with you. That was a great hour and basically hour and a half. I know our listeners are going to be quite pleased with that, and I'm going to follow up with you. And thank you so much.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to help.
All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.